All right, good evening. Let's go ahead and get started. It is now 7 o'clock, I believe, across Covington and the Northern Kentucky metro area. I know a lot of you are probably pretty well inside right now, so we hope that you'll take some time to tune in and join us here for the Frankfort Link Live. I'm Michael Monks. I'm joined again, as always, by Link NKY politics and government reporter Mark Payne, who is embedded in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 Kentucky General Assembly legislative session. Mark, thanks for being with us again.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
We'll get to talk about what's gone down this week in Frankfort, including tonight's storm momentarily. We're also happy to be joined by two local lawmakers, State Representative Kim Moser, a Republican of Taylor Mill. Representative Moser, thank you for being with us.
I guess that's my cue to unmute. Hi, Michael. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you as well. And also Democrat of Covington, Representative Buddy Wheatley. Thank you for being with us, Representative Wheatley.
My pleasure, Michael. I'm down here in the urban core with you, so just hearing the scrapers go by.
That might have been me walking by. It was a treacherous walk back here to the office. And he is the vice chairman of the Kenton County Democratic Party. His name is Dave Meyer. Dave, thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
And the chairman of the Kenton County Republican Party is Shane Noem, who is also with us. Hi, Shane.
Hey, Michael, longtime listener, first-time caller. Thanks for having me.
That's enough of that Kenton County Republican humor for the duration of this broadcast. Let's move on to what's been going on in Frankfort and Northern Kentucky today, and that is big time snow. I know a lot of you are looking out your window right now and wondering if tomorrow morning is a go for whether you're going to work or if someone's going to school or not, or whether you can get back to Kroger to see if the bread is restocked. Let's get the scoop from Frankfort from our state lawmakers and Mark Payne, who I think have all been in Frankfort at some point today. Mark, what's the situation down south?
Yes, I am still in Frankfort. So it's raining down here, as one expects. I know that they canceled I know Representative Moser, your committee meeting was canceled this morning. Senate and the House kind of got out of town early. And then tomorrow, pretty much everything's canceled. And the governor declared a state of emergency yesterday. So the weather is the big news in Frankfort for right now.
Okay, let's go to Representative Moser. You were in Frankfort at all today and had to drive back. How was it?
I was. We went into session at 10 a.m. this morning, a little earlier than we normally do. We're usually in at 2 p.m. and on Thursdays. Today's Thursday. Typically, my Health and Family Services Committee, the committee that I chair, is held at noon. Things got a little cattywampus because of all the weather forecasting. So we came in early and I decided to go ahead and cancel my committee meeting because I knew that folks wanted to get home. I wasn't quite sure we could get a quorum, and nothing so pressing that we had to do it today. So I wanted to make sure that folks got home safely.
Representative Buddy Wheatley, how was your commute?
My commute was a bit treacherous last night. I wasn't at the session today, one of the few days I've ever missed a session, but recognizing that is 8 degrees colder in the greater Cincinnati area than it was in Frankfort. So it was a little bit, I thought I was going to be driving down this morning, but discretion got the better part of valor. So I did stick home and watched the session, of course, and saw some excellent bills being passed this morning.
Right, we'll talk a bit about that coming up. And also we'll give our other two panels here the opportunity to share the view from their window. Shane, what's it look like in your part of the county?
Well, here in Fort Mitchell, it's been slushy. We've got 3 kids in our house, 2 of which are in 4th and 7th grade. So we had an NTI day at Beechwood and a 3-year-old running around in between Zoom meetings all day. So just living the pandemic, treacherous weather paradise here.
And Dave, you're in Covington as well. I think I know what you're going to say, but give us your perspective.
So walking around the city, it's incredibly rare that there aren't even footprints for you to walk in. This afternoon, the sidewalks look like they had not been touched all day, even by other pedestrians. So it is wild. I don't think I've ever seen it quite like this.
It's been many years since it's been that empty here in downtown Covington. Mark, other than the weather, which we've got out of the way, what happened in Frankfort this week? I know you had an interesting take, or I should say tale, of the Kentucky Secretary of State, who explained to you the way that the ballot order is decided when people go to vote. A lot of times that we do these live broadcasts, we talk about the upcoming primary election and the November election and the redistricting and all of that. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about who's on the ballot, but there's a process to decide the order of their names on that ballot. What'd you learn from Secretary Michael Adams this week?
Yeah, so Monday, Secretary Adams went through and chose ballot positioning for the primaries that are coming up this May. And he does it in a pretty interesting fashion. He takes wooden blocks numbered 1 through 27, puts them in a small replica bourbon barrel, shakes them up, and pulls them out. So it's pretty rudimentary, but it gets the job done, and it's pretty interesting. So it's funny. And then, in Kentucky, the law states that you have to do that. The state can't take any position as far as looking like they might be choosing who
because
goes
there's
on the
some people who
ballot
believe
second.
that it's better to be in one spot on the ballot than perhaps a different one, right?
Yeah, and there's research that supports both arguments. But a lot of folks will say, if you're first on the ballot, that you're most likely to be elected. Just because if someone's doesn't know much about election, they're just going to, circle in or check off that first box. In some research studies, it does show that ballot positioning matters.
Let me go to Kenton County GOP Chairman Shane Noem. You're a veteran of multiple campaigns. How big of a deal is it on ballot drawing day? Are you concerned about that at all? It's not, the stakes can't possibly be as high as an NFL overtime coin toss.
It's not as exciting as a coin toss, that's for sure. It's something we pay attention to, especially in your local races where there are large fields of candidates. I know Erlanger City Council members pay really close attention to this. You see a major drop off in number of votes cast for those lower number races. Judicial races are the same thing. If there's multiple judicial candidates where people maybe not as familiar with them and don't have as much information, they'll just bubble in the first one. So that first ballot spot gets a lot more votes. So it's definitely a thing we monitor.
Dave Meyer is the vice chairman of the Kenton County Democrats. You've worked on campaigns too. Any concern in the past or future about where a candidate you're supporting might wind up on the ballot?
So this year, I believe that in Kenton, Campbell, and Boone counties, the only Democratic primary is in the United States Senate race. So it does not actually matter at all this year up here. But in general, yeah, it does. I mean, you want to be first or last. And it might count for 2 points or 3 points in terms of the votes you get. But that's a lot better than nothing. So, yeah.
And again, Mark Payne is our Link NKY politics and government reporter who is based in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 Kentucky General Assembly, as we bring you direct coverage for Northern Kentucky from the state capitol during the session. Mark, what else did you learn in Frankfort this week?
I reported on a really interesting program based out of NKU, the Future Leaders Internship Program. There is a library informatics major, Jamie Collins, who is working in Representative Wheatley's office. And so it's really interesting. A lot of times it's political science majors that major in this program, but they get to work down here on Tuesdays and Thursdays in legislative offices. I know that interns have worked with Senator Chris McDaniel from Kenton County before. So yeah, it's a great program. Jamie's story is really interesting if you want to go check it out on, rcnky.com. But yeah, it's a great program, and it's a really interesting story, and perhaps Representative Wheatley could talk a little bit more about it.
I'm sure he will. And yes, you can read that story in its entirety at rcnky.com. You probably noticed, though, that the River City News is now Link NKY, and rcnky.com will become linknky.com in about, 11 days or so. So be on the lookout for that. It's a very exciting time here. But for the meantime, same old website, you can find Mark's coverage of that. Representative Wheatley, tell us about that program and how important it is to bring students from our local university to get a feel for life and work in the state government.
My pleasure, whether it's on rcnky.com or link.com or whatever it was, ky.com. Great story by Mark Payne. And, all the Northern Kentucky Caucus legislators have had interns before, but the program at NKU is particularly special, having those interns who typically are, as you said, Michael, political science related or something kind of close to that, but with a librarian informatics major who is not actually from Northern Kentucky. It is fascinating, and she's a non-traditional student also. But so I put her on some research things related to the library and where she has become very familiar with the LRC's library. So it's worked out really well. The program has worked out well. Dr. Ryan Salzman from NKU has been very accommodating with this program. And, you know, they learn a lot, and they learn quite a bit about the day-to-day work that's there, but also the research and the amount of work. And I'm sure Representative Moser's had simple or experiences very much like that too. And I'm just very honored actually to have somebody as talented and as dedicated as Jamie Collins.
Well, it is a good story. And again, you can read that now at rcnky.com. I want to talk about your district's representatives. I'll start with you, Representative Moser. You're a Republican of Taylor Mill. In the newly adopted state house maps, your district will change a bit, and you will, in fact, if you are reelected to that seat, you will be representing more of Covington, for example. And so I know a lot of people may be paying attention to you in a way they hadn't before as they get to know you in a new way. But talk a bit about that process. We've heard some arguments obviously, from the Republican side of the fence, but some complaints from the Democratic side and officially from the city of Covington and the Covington Board of Education. So share with us your thoughts on the process and what that new district looks like.
Sure. Well, to start, the census really dictates the redistricting, and that happens every 10 years, just as a refresher for folks. And because we lost so much population in the Southeast and the Southwest in Kentucky, all of our districts moved north. And so I was pushed north. I lost some of the precincts in my southern part of Independence. And yes, I'm being kind of pushed up into, I've got Latonia now, and it's very exciting for me actually. I'm moving into Covington up to about, I think it's about 19th Street, right around there. So yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. I'm excited to get to know my new district, my new constituents. And I think there are a lot of really exciting economic development projects happening in Kentucky, or in Covington rather. And I'm excited to get to know everyone and help work on those projects. And yeah, there was some angst about, you know, I don't know, I don't really consider myself a rural legislator. My district is very mixed. I have some rural, I have some suburban, and now I'll have a little bit more urban. So I'm very excited. I think that, and I've had a great meeting with Mayor Joe Meyer, and you know, I just assured him that he will have great representation from me. I'll be just as engaged in Covington as I am everywhere else. So I'm very excited.
Okay, so some of those precincts, Representative Moser, are coming from precincts previously occupied by the person I see to your right on my screen here in this Zoom broadcast. That is Representative Buddy Wheatley, Democrat of Covington. You also, if you are reelected to another term, would have some new constituents and a lot more cul-de-sacs in your district. So I know that you weren't pleased when you saw the map. Share with our viewers and the rest of us here on the panel your feelings and on the process and the new district.
Well, thanks, Michael. And, you know, I know we only have another about 45 minutes, so I'll try to be brief. I have learned a lot about redistricting and the process in the last year, particularly, and a lot on the legal end. I loved my old district, but like Representative Moser, I look forward to meeting the new parts of my district. My district wasn't pushed north. I was actually pushed south. So some of it doesn't make sense. And I can say with confidence, as I said on the House floor, none of it makes sense as far as the redistricting principles that are pushed by the experts about how you redistrict. So all of that said, you know, there is challenges each time redistricting happens. You know, the population shifts are required, requires the map drawers to do these kinds of things. And there are a lot of legal restrictions and guidelines on how you're supposed to do this. We don't think they did them all perfectly legal, and it's not just Covington that this happened to. The splitting up of some smaller mid-sized cities throughout the state was probably not done as best as it could be. So I really won't go into that, but I really look forward to those cul-de-sacs and my friends and family out in my new part of my district. I'm from a long time Northern Kentucky person, lived in Fort Mitchell for 10 years. And, I have lots of contacts out there, and I look forward to, just like Representative Moser. It's kind of exciting. So, I have a lot of things that I want to get done for my district as it is for now, because we are in these districts until the election happens. And then I look forward to doing the new things for the new parts of my district and getting to know them.
Does that your district currently, the one that sent you to Frankfort last time, is primarily North Covington and Ludlow, Bromley, Park Hills area, but now you are being shifted into this district. The 65th House district is being shifted to include a lot of Edgewood, a lot more Fort Wright. Would you have like the Dillards now and Crestview Hills? Is that in the 65th now too?
Yes, there's one precinct. Crestview Hills has 2 precincts, and I have the more easternly precinct of Crestview Hills and Dillards, yes, which I used to run around when I trained for the marathon back, many years ago, when I lived in Fort Mitchell. But yes, it is all of Fort Wright, all of Park Hills, about 6 precincts into Edgewood, and one of the precincts of Crestview Hills, and no longer none of Bromley, none of Ludlow, and a little part of West Covington also has been put into Representative Banta's district.
Yes, of course. Your district was also taken for a representative who was coming in from the western part of Kenton County and Fort Mitchell. Speaking of Fort Mitchell, let's go to Kenton County GOP Chairman Shane Noem. From the Republican perspective, Shane, why does Democrat Buddy Wheatley of Covington now have the Dillards in the 65th House district?
Well, not being a legislator, I wasn't able to get in the weeds on the mathematics side of drawing these lines. It's completely a legislature decision. But from my perspective, I think Covington and Kenton County win under these maps. Kenton County went from 6 legislators to 10. Covington in particular gained a senator and gained a representative out of it. So those are more voices walking into the Capitol every day saying, what's best for Kenton County? What's best for Covington? In particular, the voice gained in Representative Banta and Representative Moser. You've got 2 very respected legislators in the majority party representing Covington. No disrespect to Representative Wheatley, but I bet he will agree with something Senator Mitch McConnell often says, and that's, I've governed in the majority, I've governed in the minority, I'd much rather govern in the majority. There's just a lot more that you can do, a lot more amplification that your voice has. And so I think you'll see Covington represented very, very well under these new maps, and we're very excited.
Dave Meyer is the vice chairman of the Kenton County Democrats. Dave, I have a suspicion you see things differently.
I do a bit here. First, I hope that Shane is right, and that if these maps do survive judicial scrutiny, that the new Republican representatives in the area are interested in advocating for the city of Covington and for the residents here. I think that everyone kind of knows that what's really going on here is that the math did not require these changes. This was not something that was forced on us by the census. This is a pretty crass attempt to break up potentially competing political constituencies in Covington. It's to break up the Democratic base up here. And I mean, we know that this is how redistricting works. We know that we have communities of interest here that are outside of the political process, that aren't partisan, Democrat or Republican, and that it's those communities of interest that end up getting damaged in this process. So, Covington has had a single primary representative since the 1891 Constitution. In 2012, when the Democrats were in charge of redistricting the House, they tried to split Covington up, and the Republican-led commission at the time with Chuck Shepard and Steve Frank passed a resolution opposing redistricting, opposing splitting Covington up. They said 2 ways was fine with Representative Kerr in the southern part, and at the time Representative Simpson up here, but 3 ways was too much. I think that both of them would probably agree that what they've done now is tragic in terms of splitting the community. It is going to present problems going forward, and I think it's not just in Covington itself, but all of Northern Kentucky with the various cities being split the way they've been. We'll have to see if it survives the litigation process, and if it does, what our options are going forward.
I want to ask you, Representative Moser, the Republicans in the State House have a pretty significant, I think 3-to-1 majority, supermajority, impenetrable majority. You can virtually do what you want unless the courts intervene. How many more Republicans do you want down there? I mean, what's the talk among the Republican caucus? Like, at what point do you look around the room and say, more, we need more?
Well, I think that, we all want to protect our majority. And it is, in our opinion, important to be able to get the good work done. We've passed some very business-friendly policies since we have taken the majority, and it's benefiting Covington. It's benefiting our state. And I think that, all of the growth that we're seeing is a result of some of the really good policies that we passed. So, and as Representative Wheatley knows, I am very bipartisan in the work that I do. And in fact, we're working on a bill together now that we can talk about later if you want. But, I think that regardless of who is in charge, it is important that we all work together, and I intend to do that. How many do we need? It gets interesting when you have the majority, and like any family, you have disagreements, and it's interesting. I enjoy being in the majority. I've never been in the minority. I don't really want to be in the minority. I do think that Covington wins, having if Representative Wheatley is reelected, he's doing a fine job, and I think that we work together well, and I anticipate that continuing.
I mean, technically, you hope Buddy loses, right? I mean, you're going to support.
Well, I mean,
Well, Mike, I'll even jump in to say, it's politics, and it's, Democrats and Republicans. I think I work well with all of the Northern Kentucky caucus and many of the others in the Republican leadership. You have to, if you want to get anything done and as part of a 25-member minority, you do. Also the imbalance is a lot not helpful, I think, in just the spirit of democracy. Some of the things we've seen this session as far as limiting voices with some rule changes and having the ability to change the rules in a heartbeat. I'm talking about the majority party when it comes to procedural things we do on the floor. More things like that are happening throughout, I guess, as time goes on, that the majority party has the kind of majority they do. And a better balance is a better balance. It gives us an opportunity to speak, to be able to have dissent. One of the cornerstones of democracy is to hear the other side. And we're hearing less and less and less of it with some of the rule changes, some of the way that Kentucky is voting. And of course, that's their everybody's prerogative, but also with the way the maps that are drawn, it does look like it could become more of a majority. And of course, Democrats had this ability to do this for close to 100 years. And
that's right. And that's what I want to talk to you about next. But first, let me remind our viewers that you are watching the Frankfort Link live. I'm Michael Monks alongside Link NKY politics and government reporter Mark Payne, who is in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 Kentucky General Assembly session. He'll be reporting at rcnky.com. And then on February 15, linknky.com from Frankfort, giving Northern Kentucky a media presence full-time in the state capitol during the session. We're also joined by State Representative Kim Moser, Republican of Taylor Mill, and Buddy Wheatley, Democrat of Dillard's, and Kenton County Democratic Party Vice Chairman Dave Meyer is with us, along with Kenton County Republican Chairman Shane Noem. I kid Representative Wheatley, of course, he's a Democrat of Covington. And I want to ask you, Representative Wheatley, because yes, the shoe was on the other foot for a long time in Kentucky history. Democratic supermajorities in the state capitol, in the state house for longer than the state senate. I know I have that wrong, but they had in the state house for a very, very long time. And I'm wondering, how does the party get in the shape that it's in Kentucky, where it isn't competitive really in most parts of the state? And specifically, it's not competitive in Northern Kentucky. This is an election year for local offices as well. And there are county-wide elections in Kentucky's third largest county where your party is fielding no candidates at all whatsoever. How does the party get in this condition repeatedly, cycle after cycle?
You know, Michael, if I had the answer to that, we wouldn't be in this situation. And also, throughout the country, we're seeing more of the urban, suburban, rural divide. And I also believe that the national politics are playing a lot more of a role in the state of Kentucky than other areas. I also think that, you know, it was a very conservative Democratic Party that was in power for as long as they were. And they played the games and they knew all the things to do to maintain that control for as long as possible. And Kentucky was one of the last Southern states to switch its majority status from Democrat to Republican. And it has swung hard. So the pendulum will eventually swing back. We think the voters will eventually see the value of a more balanced representation in Frankfort. And, you know, the fact that we have not or have had certain people file for offices this election cycle, it's just, you know, when you look at even some of the things that have happened nationally, to put your name out there and to see that I would even say the jeopardy that the democracy is in, it actually gives people pause and gives people a lot of pause. And to get into the minority level of what you do, you got to have a lot of courage. And I can tell you that it does take that. And I look forward to doing it. I like being a representative. I feel like I can be effective continuously. And I don't know if, you know, somebody who is new to it will want to get into it when it's in this kind of situation. So, you know, we will work and continue to work to swing that pendulum back.
I'm going to go over to Shane Noem. He is the chairman of the Kenton County Republican Party. And Representative Wheatley said something that I just wrote an editorial about that will be in our print edition coming in mailboxes across all three counties at the end of February. That basically states the problem with a lot of local politics is that we view most government actions and certainly campaigns through a national lens now. And there are certainly parts of this country where Republicans find themselves in a situation similar to the one Democrats find themselves in Kentucky. Do you agree that national politics are perhaps negatively impacting our understanding of the significance and of the actual issues that surround local politics, state politics?
It definitely has a role, and it depends on the race in a lot of cases. But at the end of the day, all politics are local. We've got really good representatives representing us in Kenton County, especially on the county level. And I think that speaks volumes as to why nobody is running against them. And so at the end of the day, you know, the Republican elected official that you can yell at the grocery store is going to be what you think of as the Republican Party. Obviously, what you see on the news at 6 o'clock every night is going to have an impression too. But, you know, your locals are going to have a really big impact on that. We've got a really interesting county politically, where we've got three bands, and Boone, Kenton, and Campbell all kind of fall under this. We've got a strong urban core, we've got a suburban ring, and we've got a rural belt along the southern part of the county. And there are three very different constituencies and three very different groups of interests. And again, I think it speaks volumes to our elected officials that they're representing all three different interests really well. And I think that's going to be what the Republican Party needs to focus on moving forward, is making sure that all the constituencies are being represented appropriately and adequately, and their voices are being heard.
Dave Meyer is the vice chairman of the Kenton County Democratic Party. I imagine that approval ratings of the Republican fiscal court, no comment on their performance, certainly, but there's no debate going on. I imagine that it's not their popularity that is keeping Democrats out of the field. Why aren't there Democrats running?
So the main reason is probably the expense of a race in Kenton County, and the fact that as we just discussed when we were talking about redistricting, right now there is not a good stepping stone between running for Covington City Commission or a city commission in Erlanger or Ellesmere or Park Hills, and going from that to running for a countywide office. It's very difficult to build your name ID and get well known throughout the county if you are stuck in one of those municipal level or local level elected positions. Having the state house races, state house districts drawn in such a way where, as Shane just mentioned, all four of the Republicans who are expected to be in the general election in this cycle will be from that middle tier of suburban cities that it will be difficult to compete with them. So when you've got no middle ground from which a local elected official can move, it's harder to find people to run countywide. It is the third largest county. It's expensive to run a race here. There are a lot of people to turn out. It requires a big infrastructure, and it's hard to build up to that from a municipal race.
Well, there is a Democrat who is apparently very popular in Kentucky, and that is Governor Andy Beshear. A new poll out in recent days shows him with a 60% approval rating. Representative Kim Moser is a Republican from Taylor Mill. Representative Moser, why is everyone wild about Andy?
That's a really good question, and obviously it depends on who you ask. I think the ARPA funds, the federal dollars that are coming in, are just flowing into Kentucky, and he's ready and able to take credit for all of that, and credit for all of the businesses moving into Kentucky, which I alluded to earlier, which may or may not be due to anything that he did, but I think that it's a snapshot in time. I think that opinions will wax and wane, as we've seen. Certainly, his rating hasn't been as high as it is right now throughout the pandemic. There have been great difficulties, that businesses and people have really endured. So, it's a snapshot in time. We'll just see how this lasts, whether or not it endures. I'm not sure it will, but we shall see.
And Mark Payne is the Link NKY politics and government reporter in Frankfort. Sorry, I've been ignoring you, buddy. Of course, doing a great job covering Frankfort on behalf of Northern Kentucky at rcnky.com. And then on February 15th, we start with linknky.com. Mark, did this poll send any waves through the Capitol? Did you hear any chatter about it? I certainly saw the governor celebrating a little bit on social media.
Yeah, I think you're going to see what you would expect. Republicans are saying, that this poll doesn't have a lot of meaning, and Democrats are certainly celebrating it. And you look at the poll size; it's not huge, but it's across the state. But from this poll, it shows that Andy's pretty popular, and Democrats are celebrating it, and Republicans are saying it doesn't hold much weight.
But that same poll, Shane Noem, Kenton County Republican chairperson, showed a pretty significant lead for Republican Senator Rand Paul over Democratic challenger Charles Booker. We'll note that Charles Booker is not officially the Democratic nominee yet, but is heavily favored to be. So this is the same poll, right, that has these results showing about 60% approval rating for Democratic Governor Andy Beshear and a pretty wide lead for Rand Paul in a hypothetical matchup with Democratic challenger Charles Booker. So how do you interpret a poll like that has mixed results?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is in Kentucky, we often do this, especially going back to 2000. We split and skew a little more to the left on our localer races, and localer is a word I'm coining. And our federal races end up skewing more conservative. But you got a couple things going on here, in my opinion. One is you don't have a matchup with Governor Beshear. He has been, as he says, the wartime governor against the pandemic, and that comes with some popularity boost. He's not a shoo-in candidate, but he's also not a pushover. Republicans are going to field an aggressive campaign against him, and Republican success will come down to if we nominate a well-backed and well-resourced and financed candidate ready to go up against him. But look into the Senate race. This is one where we've got an opponent. We pretty much know what the field's going to look like, and you have the ability to contrast. And so you get a more definite picture. And if I'm not mistaken, Governor Beshear's poll was with all registered voters, where the Booker-Paul poll is with likely voters. But Charles Booker is a little bit different of a candidate. He's more to the left of Governor Beshear. He supports more controversial platforms like defunding the police that just don't resonate in Kentucky. Dr. Paul's he's sitting on $8 million. Booker's sitting on 400,000. So there's a message. Ability to share a message that's different. And Senator Paul's been out there working the state and speaking out against waste, fraud, and abuse for years. And I think Kentuckians are going to reward him with another re-election, and looking forward to voting for him again.
When he's out there, though, talking about his principles, what is he pointing to as evidence of his representation of Kentucky and Washington, D.C., Shane? I mean, what record does Senator Rand Paul run on? We know that your good friend, Senator Mitch McConnell, comes here with bags of money all the time. I don't necessarily see his fellow Republican senator doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, much like his predecessor, Jim Bunning, they are very outspoken critics of, again, waste, fraud, and abuse, and really zeroing in on every dollar that is being spent in Washington. And that's a really important topic to Republican primary voters. We are worried about the deficit. I think it's up to $30 trillion. Look, Republicans and Democrats can be blamed for that, but calling that out is being rewarded. And so I think you're going to continue to see that being what he runs on, and his record of calling out wasteful spending.
Mark Payne is a One NKY politics and government reporter in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 General Assembly. That we hope to be covering some campaigns here, including that U.S. Senate race, Mark. And I want to give you the opportunity to address any questions to the panel, if you've got anything thought up over there.
I don't have anything right now, Michael. I
know that the lawmakers. Well, go on. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, Shane brought up an important point about the money that I saw that Booker's PAC raised like 19,000 from the summer, and then Rand's raised 6 million last year, but that was just from 2 donors. And sometimes it seems like it definitely is the money behind those 2 candidates. And if we look at McConnell ran against McGrath last year, and McGrath beat Booker in the primaries. I'm curious if it seems like it might be a similar thing this year, and perhaps Shane could talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's not as significant a primary this time as there was last time on the Democratic side.
Correct.
Yeah, and we'll get to our Democratic representatives in just a moment. But Shane, since Mark addressed that to you, let's go ahead.
Yeah, and I think Charles Booker might have been the nominee if the election had been at a little bit different timing last year. He was really surging and I think about to take out McGrath in that primary. But at the end of the day, donations to candidates speak to the support they've got. Senator Paul has a national profile. He's been supported by more libertarian groups over the years, which have really supported his message. And I think he's going to be well-funded and well-backed going into November.
Dave Meyer is the vice chairman of the Kenton County Democratic Party. I know that the 2020 Democratic primary left some salty feelings, as some partisan, or I guess inter-party primaries do often, every now and then, and place to place. But this time, Charles Booker seems to be the front runner without serious competition there in the Democratic primary. Is he going to have a message that resonates more statewide. I heard from our Republican friends here on the panel that maybe Andy Beshear is a different kind of Democrat for some people to consider compared to somebody like Charles Booker.
So I realize this is kind of a cop-out, but I am an officer within the Democratic Party, and we are neutral in primaries, even from a pontification standard. So what I'll say is that elections change fast, and we saw this. I mean, the lesson of 2020 that I took away was that going into May and then into June, it looked like there was not going to be a primary in the Democratic side then either in 2020. And the facts on the ground changed. And when the facts on the ground changed, candidates were able to take advantage and raise an awful lot of money very fast and compete in a way that no one expected to happen. So, you can look at numbers in January. If you look at numbers in January from 2020, they would look very different than they did in June. You should not count your chickens until they're hatched in terms of a United States Senate race. You guys will let me go back to the Beshear stuff for a minute. There's not a primary there yet. I think that the numbers that we saw in the polling for Governor Beshear confirmed what we thought. And they confirmed it because the Republican legislature has spent the last year and a half trying to strip authority from the governor's office, from the executive branch. And we know that they're doing that primarily because they don't expect to take it back in 2023. Just this week, they are trying to do constitutional amendments to allow them to call themselves into special session. They're trying to take the Kentucky State Police away from the governor. They're doing issue after issue. They are stripping the governor's authority, just like they did. I mean, they've done this around the country in Wisconsin and North Carolina, elsewhere. They wouldn't be doing that here if they didn't think there was a pretty good chance that Governor Beshear was going to be governor past 2023. So the poll numbers, his 60% approval rating confirmed what we thought going into this situation.
You're watching the Frankfort Link live here on Facebook. We're so grateful. I'm Michael Monks with Mark Payne, who is a One NKY politics and government reporter. That was Democratic Party of Kenton County Vice Chairman Dave Meyer. We've also got Kenton County Republican Chairman Shane Noem, State Representative Kim Moser, Republican of Taylor Mill, and State Representative Buddy Wheatley, Democrat of Covington. And we are going to wind this down a little bit. I don't like to go past an hour, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the themes that have emerged, particularly executive power, legislative power, co-equal branches of government, and all that fun civic stuff that I think we learned about again over the course of this pandemic. We were all forced to hear a lot about simple government separations of power and to have some deeper thoughts about it than perhaps we ever had before outside of middle school. Representative Wheatley, talk a bit about what's happening from your perspective as a legislator and the way the legislature is addressing the governor and vice versa, because we've certainly heard Republican complaints about a lack of engagement that they say that the Beshear administration does not engage in.
Still got to hit that on mute.
2 years into this pandemic, you're still having to hit that.
I'll address the last part first. I have been, I'll call it very fortunate to get to know the governor on a more of a personal level in the last couple of years. And the stiff wooden character that was maybe the part of his persona a couple of years ago, I think all of Kentucky and even all of the country has seen a kind, compassionate, empathetic, hardworking governor that they just like. There's the concerns about, when you have gubernatorial powers and you have a pandemic and you have the economy and you have your people to take care of, you got to take some decisive action. As a fire chief, I had to do that. And I had full power to do things during an emergency. Now, an emergency lasting as long as it has had an effect on people's consciousness about, what is an emergency and how much power should governors have. And this has played out all over the country. So there has been some reduction of his power and it continues, which is a little bit surprising. So I'm kind of agreeing with Dave Meyer there. They must be very concerned because they might expect him to be around for a while. And we hope so, because I think Kentucky, with the kind of economic development that's really happening, that he's been able to soldier through, this part of his during the pandemic. It's not just the federal dollars that are coming in. Thank goodness they are, because it's a big part of our economy, even though we had almost no Republicans ever support anything like that. But it has led to the dollars in the reserve balances that we have in Kentucky, and able to have a budget that's doing a lot more than we've been able to do for more than a generation.
Representative Moser, certainly a lot of your Republican colleagues have eagerly come into the session with plans to address some perceived misuse of power or different uses of power that they didn't like from the governor during the emergency. So talk a bit from the Republican side about how you've seen this play out, the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch during this unprecedented health crisis.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. It really has been unprecedented. No one knew what to expect. So I think in the beginning, we really gave the governor the benefit of the doubt. We were all trying to really wade through what this meant. And as the pandemic went on, I think that it really highlighted a lack of checks and balances in the executive, through the executive orders that were being passed. A true lack of response to our leadership. There was no communication. There was really no engagement with the governor, despite our efforts. And I think that level of frustration is what led us to really look at making sure that we have some legislative checks and balances, and that and the Supreme Court agreed with us that there is a separation of powers. We are co-equal branches of the government, and we should be part of any major decisions that affect our state, our citizens, and that just was not happening during the pandemic. So we went into this fully understanding that these legislative changes, these statutory changes, affect any governor. So I can assure you, we never had a conversation that said, gee, this governor is going to be around a while, so we really need to put these changes in place. That just didn't happen. We were very thoughtful in our approach to making sure that our constituency has representation through any state of emergency. Now, this state of emergency has gone on far longer than anyone anticipated. Hopefully, we'll never see this again. But I think that the checks and balances that we put in place are really strengthening the voice of our constituency, and that was the intent.
I want to go to Shane Noem, who is a Republican chairman of the Kenton County Republican Party, I should say. And Shane, I'm wondering what it's like to be involved in the Republican Party, which seems to have, less cohesiveness on how to respond to COVID. And certainly we're all tired of this thing 2 years later, but for the duration of this pandemic, I've seen a lot of mixed messages from Republican leaders and Republican candidates on mask and no mask and vaccine or no vaccine and that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering how you, as an active member of the Republican Party in Kenton County, have had to navigate those different Republican sects within the organization.
Yeah, I would say it's more apparent with the Republican activists and Republican candidates, but this is really, there's a lot of debate on all sides of it. I'm vaxxed, I mask up where appropriate, and encourage everybody to consult with their healthcare provider to do what's best for them. But aside from that, when it gets down to the differences on policy, as the legislators noted, the governor chose a go it alone approach here in Kentucky. He hasn't consulted with the legislators. He hasn't consulted with anybody outside of his circle. And you have to own that. There's Kentucky businesses that have closed because of the decisions he's made. The childcare centers that were shut down, he's got to answer for those. He can't put the blame on legislators when he chose to go that alone. The unemployment insurance debacle, he's going to have to deal with himself. 400,000 emails were deleted and not responded to. The auditor's report showed that. He's got to answer for that. He can't share blame with anybody else. So there are consequences that when there's a nominee from the Republican side, I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that. But that's really the risk. There are a lot of opinions and thoughts on this, but at the end of the day, The science is simple. Wear a mask, get vaccinated, protect yourself. Let's get back to work as quick as we can. Let's keep our economy going, and let's not shut down our entire country again.
Dave Meyer is the vice chairman of the Kenton County Democratic Party. And Dave, you know, I've heard the governor referred to as a tyrant. I think of somebody like Andy Beshear, who has now won 2 statewide elections as a Democrat by the thinnest of margins. That what type of strange position one would put himself in to reign as a tyrant with such a slim victory in both of those state races. I mean, he has to know how vulnerable he is naturally as a Democrat in Kentucky. So how does the governor run for re-election on the COVID specific response?
Since his powers were stripped away, Kentucky went from having one of the best responses in the nation, especially considering the background health factors we're dealing with as a state, to one of the worst. Throughout the Omicron wave, we've been in the top 10 in terms of deaths per 100,000 people in the country. It has been brutal in terms of the damage it's done to our healthcare system and to our population. And he has not been able to respond. And he's not been able to respond because of decisions that were made by the Republican legislature to take away his powers, and frankly, because of absurd decisions by some of McConnell's friends in the court system. And that has hindered his ability. And if you're talking about responsibility for business closures and for economic damage, we have suffered as much during this wave as we did during earlier ones, even though there were no safety measures put in place. The economic damage that has been done during Omicron was worse than during Delta or than the original wave. So we will be able to talk about this. I look forward to talking about it throughout the 2023 cycle and the 2022 cycle. And I think that the facts measure up pretty firmly on the governor's side.
Mark Payne is One NKY politics and government reporter embedded in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 Kentucky General Assembly session. Mark, what does it look like COVID-wise in the Capitol? I mean, are there a lot of masks? Are there not a lot of masks? Are there rules that people are being asked to follow? This is your first time down there. What are you seeing?
Well, if you walk into the Capitol, it says masks are mandatory. That is definitely not the case at the Capitol. I think there is a lot of conscious effort from, both sides to say that the vaccines are safe, that they're okay, that you can get them. But I would definitely say that the majority of the Republican Party does not wear masks in the Capitol. And it is not something that is on the minds of folks. I know that there were a few candidates or a few representatives and senators that got COVID. But yeah, it's just something that, the rule says on the front door, masks are required, but that's definitely not followed.
All right, before we run, Representatives Moser and Wheatley, I think we heard a hint earlier in the broadcast that you all are working together on a piece of legislation. Representative Moser, tell us what it is, and then we'll go to Representative Wheatley.
Okay, sure. I mean, it's something that was brought to our attention actually during the interim, and we've had conversations. I think even before this session, Buddy, you'll probably remember conversations about ambulances, ambulance service, and emergency medical. The Kentucky it's KBEAMS, the Kentucky Board of EMS, and so it's a bit of a reorg situation of that board, and it's just a lot of fun getting stakeholders together, getting the policy right, and improving our response times around the state. It's been very problematic for not only emergency but non-emergency, transferring patients to different levels of care, and so we're looking at ways to solve that. And I mean, Buddy and I, Buddy has a background in fire and EMS, so I pulled him into the conversation knowing that he also has legal expertise in that area. So, part of what we do is know who's really good at something, and not everyone can be an expert in everything. So we know who is, and I work a lot on healthcare issues, and so yeah, we're kind of working on the KBEAMS. We call it though.
Representative Wheatley, I understand you're going to be attaching recreational cannabis to this piece of legislation as well, right?
That's a floor amendment, Michael, that I'm not sure if I'm going to attach it to that or to the
I
budget.
couldn't let the show in without at least referencing it. I almost let the
I
whole
know, I caught a little
Yeah.
bit of last week's show, so I agree with, I like working with Representative Moser on this. We have had several other issues. She's the healthcare expert. And something that I can say is very positive this beginning part of this session is the mental health bills that have been passed, several, and Representative Moser can talk about them a lot better than I can, but I tell people who say, why do you do this? I mean, you're super minority and it can't be any fun. I say about 85% of what we do down there really doesn't have anything to do with the partisan side, this side or that side. It's getting good work done. And I enjoy doing that, and I look forward to doing that. I work hard doing it, as does Representative Moser. And we will have more issues we work on. This K-Beams reorg is a little bit complicated, as almost all reorgs are, and we'll get that done to the satisfaction of the stakeholders. And that's who's been brought to the table, and that's important.
That's Representative Buddy Wheatley, Democrat of Covington. We've also been joined by Representative Kimberly Moser, Republican of Taylor Mill, Kenton County Democratic Party Vice Chairman Dave Meyer, Kenton County Republican Chairman Shane Noem, and my good pal, Link NKY politics and government reporter Mark Payne. Mark, what should we be looking for next week in Frankfort?
That's a good question. I think the budget is still going to be an issue. I know I haven't seen any of the House budget bills go through the Senate yet, so I'm sure that they're going to at some point. I know that there was some presentation last week, some presentations from universities as far as their funding as part of the House bill. And then at some point, the Republicans are definitely going to be addressing tax reform. I know that that's huge on their agenda, and so that should be sometime in the future as well.
We'll look forward to your coverage at rcnky.com and then linknky.com. We'll be back next Thursday with another Frankfort Link Live, more panelists, more lawmakers. My thanks again to Representatives Moser and Wheatley, and to Dave, Shane, and Mark, and all of you for watching tonight. Don't forget to sign up for the Daily Link. Go to linknky.com and get Northern Kentucky news directly in your inbox every morning. I'm Michael Monks. We'll talk again soon, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.